Hi guys, Ricky Pope here, and this week on the Christian Nerd Unite podcast, I talk with Chris Savino, animation writer and director for the past 25 years, and creator of The Loud House on Nickelodeon. We talk about his rise in the animation industry and finding God after losing almost all of it. Plus, scripture and nerdy news, and we'll get to all of that right after this.
Hey guys, this is Ashley Cox from Fangirling Over Jesus. At FOJ, we believe in hope and light in the darkness and that you are not alone. We seek to unite and celebrate the intersection of the gospel and our favorite fandoms, and we get to do this through our social media, our podcast devotional, and our cosplay and fashion. And you can find links to all of that through our website, www.fangirlingoverjesus.com, through our social media at Fangirlingoverjesus, wherever you get your podcasts, and on Etsy. See you online.
And lead me on to your kingdom come, surrendering, let your work be done. My life I give for the glory of your Son.
I want to say thank you for listening to the Christian Nerd Unite podcast week after week. Recently, we helped launch the Christian Nerd HQ podcast network. The network releases content every weekday. Christian Nerd Unite on Mondays, Tatooine Sons with David Jesse and his sons, BB Nate and Samuel the Hutt on Tuesdays, Fangirling Over Jesus with Ashley Cox on Wednesdays, The Reverend and the Reprobate with Lucas and Danley on Thursdays, and the Speaking Nerdy podcast every Friday with host Mike Schilling and myself. Go check out ChristianNerdHQ.com to follow all the podcasts, and check out the Christian Nerd HQ YouTube channel for exclusive content we're making together. Let's start with some scripture. We're going to read Psalm 51, 1 through 12. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you're right in your verdict and justified when you judge. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. Yet you desire faithfulness even in the womb. You taught me wisdom in that secret place. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sin and blot out all my iniquity. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. David wrote many of the Psalms, and many are like this one, describing his failings and for God to rescue him. He was on top, he was king, but he still desired more and fell into sin because of it. When Samuel called him out, he grieved and pled with God. My guest today took a big fall in the secular world and finally realized that God is what he needed all along, rather than the fame, fortune, and attention he had been chasing all his life. We can be like that sometimes. We must each stop and see where we are. Are we drawing closer to God, or are we drawing closer to the world? I pray that this week you will take time to reflect on where you are and where you're headed, and that God will give you direction and to dive deeper into his will. Now for some nerdy news. A rather lackluster box office this weekend, with Insidious: The Red Door coming in number one with less than $33 million. A pretty poorly reviewed fifth installment in the Insidious horror movie franchise. Still beating out the latest Indiana Jones film, coming in second for its second week with just $26 million, bringing it to a worldwide box office of $247 million, still not reaching its reported production and marketing costs. And Sounds of Freedom, a faith-based film about rescuing people from sex trafficking, coming in third at 18 million. Even though not released worldwide and opening on July 4th, it has already reached $40 million total box office domestically on a budget of, as it says, only $14 million. This film is a great success, though some are questioning whether the true story has been greatly embellished in some way in the film. The Hollywood Reporter is saying that Jennifer Garner will reprise her role as Elektra in the upcoming Deadpool 3 movie. We've not seen her in this role since her 2003 debut in Daredevil and the 2005 Elektra. This could be fueling the rumors that Ben Affleck could reprise his role as Daredevil in the film. Most of the regulars from Deadpool 1 and 2 are returning, including Vanessa, Blind Al, and Dopinder. Rob Delaney is also expected to reprise his role as Peter. Even with the writer's strike, the film is expected to finish shooting soon in the UK. Having acquired film and TV rights to the C.S. Lewis Narnia book series in 2018, Netflix is expected to begin pre-production on something in the near future. And this week, The New Yorker reported that Greta Gerwig has a deal to direct 2 films in the franchise. Gerwig recently directed the upcoming Barbie movie and has been nominated 3 times for an Oscar. There's no official announcement from Netflix yet. Many in the faith community are concerned that Netflix and Gerwig will not hold true to the Christian allegory that exists in the Narnia books. We will be watching to see what happens there. I recently connected with Chris Savino, creator of the Nickelodeon show The Loud House. Before coming to Christ, Chris had been in the animation industry for many years, working on shows like Dexter's Laboratory, The Powerpuff Girls, and Kick Buttowski. In the interview, we talk about his career in the industry and Chris's personal mistakes and what led him to find God at his lowest. Let's get right into the interview. Chris Savino, it is so great to have you on the Christian Nerd Unite podcast today.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I didn't know I was a nerd until you asked me to be on the show, and now I'm going to add that to my name.
Well, I was going to say a lot of my listeners have probably either had kids that watched your shows or were kids that watched your shows. Because I know I have watched a lot of the stuff that you have worked on over the years. So you have been in animation for what now, like 30 years or something?
Over 30 since 1991.
1991. What is the animation industry like? How did that all happen? What happened to get you interested in this idea and to get you rolling?
Man, we're going back pre-computers, pre-internet days. So hopefully your listeners will understand some of the words I'm using, like fax machine and telephone that's connected to the wall.
Well, I will tell you, a few weeks ago, I had one of the godfathers of text-based computer games on the show, Scott Adams. So he is a fascinating guy that learned how to computer program in the late 60s, early 70s.
That's way back. That's even before me. Just to go back even before 91, animation was not something that was in my mind as a career growing up. I loved cartoons and I drew mostly out of comic strips was my desire to be a comic strip artist, Charles Schulz, etc. So that's where I was heading. And it was almost like a crossroads where I started to realize that the sheer numbers game of getting a syndicated comic strip was so great, and then also realizing that there were actual people making those cartoons that I was watching, and that it is a career. So I kind of shifted focus. It's always in the back of my mind, sometimes in the forefront of my mind, of wanting to have a syndicated comic strip, but with the newspapers, etc., we haven't quite found a viable kind of way of doing it for a living, we'll say, not just out of the love. Anyway, so I turned towards cartoons and making cartoons. And I had a healthy dose of, like Jay Ward, Rocky Bullwinkle, and gosh, what were some of my favorites growing up? Even like Kimba the White Lion was for some reason my local station. Anyway, so in 1990, I want to say, I had been following, like, I'm from Michigan, so I may as well have been from Mars because we were just far away from everything. And I had a subscription to Animation Magazine, like somehow that was going to make me an animator. I don't know. But I had noticed in there that the creator of, not the creator, he was the director of the new Mighty Mouse series, which was a cartoon that I was watching on Saturday mornings. I think it was CBS, and was just in love with how they were making cartoons. It was nothing like the TV commercial cartoons like He-Man or She-Ra. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but it was different. It was comedy and it was wild drawings and poses, and it just really struck me. And I had seen that he had a short that he had done called Big House Blues, starring these two characters, Ren and Stimpy, and it was coming as part of an animation festival in Detroit. So of course I saw it and I loved it. It was a great short. Like everything about it reminded me of the Looney Tunes cartoons from the 30s and 40s and even into the 50s. And not long after that, another article, just a really brief thing, is like John Kricfalusi's Ren and Stimpy picked up to series by Nickelodeon, and that it was being produced out of his Spumco Studios on Melrose. Like, that was the blurb. And I was like, man, I got to work there. And I had graduated high school. I was installing alarm systems with my brother-in-law. And I just needed to get into the industry. I couldn't afford, with 10 kids in my family, I could not afford to go to art school. So I did this thing. On a typewriter, you type it and the words get stamped onto a piece of paper. I wrote a letter to him. I literally had to go to the library to get the address. Like there were LA phone books in the library. So I looked up Spumco and it was there. I got his address, sent him a letter and a drawing that I had done. The drawing that I had done on, like, I drew it on cell and painted it because that's what I thought you needed to do to show that you could draw. I took a color Xerox of that, which was also a very new thing, and mailed it to him. And 2 weeks later, believe it or not, I got a phone call from the creator of Ren and Stimpy. He's like, hey, I liked your drawing. We want to see a little bit more of how you draw rather than the final drawing. So can you send me more stuff from your sketchbooks? I'm like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. So as soon as I hung up the phone with him, pulled out all these pages from my sketchbook and had to go to an office supply shop to do this thing called faxing. And it was like thermal paper, like the whole 9 yards. It comes out brown. Anyway, I faxed him my all of my sketch pages. And I don't know how much longer after, maybe another week, he called me and said, I really liked your sketches. If you want to come out to LA, you have a job. And, I'm jumping for joy on the inside, but trying to remain calm talking to him on the phone. But that was in probably March of 91. And I was on the road driving to Los Angeles, my first time out of my home, let alone out of Michigan, driving to LA. And that was the start of my career. And, you started with, like, what is it like in the animation industry? It's funny because I was working with not only the most talented cartoonists in the industry, I felt at the time, but also some people who were really fed up with the industry also. So they had this, they'd been working in it in a while. They were tired of, like the TV commercial style shows. So they had already earned their stripes as far as working in the industry. And I'm this new kid, and I see all these people moaning about the industry. So of course, that's what I do. I'm moaning about the industry, thinking like, yeah, this is how I fit in. Nope. He's like, no, dude, you've got to earn that. And I don't think I ever really earned that for at least the first decade in the industry. I realized, like, the industry is small. You got to be careful what you say, who you say it to. And if people are gossiping, let's just say, for example, there's a good chance if you join in that they're gossiping about you to other people too. So you learn those really fast. And I think it was helpful. I was on Ren and Stimpy for the first season and left. And it stuck with me like, boy, I really kind of blew some opportunities here at this studio. But, Nickelodeon had taken Ren and Stimpy kind of away from John Kay, the creator, and some of the folks who were working on the show continued the production. So at a certain point, a couple of years later, maybe 3 or 4, I reached out to the guy who was running the show at the time, and I just, look, I feel like I blew my opportunities to show you what I'm capable of, and I'd really love another chance. And he did. He gave me another chance, and I'm grateful for that. I made sure it was about like paying attention to what these guys were doing and saying, how they were drawing, etc., and just absorbing as much as I could in drawing, storytelling, joke telling, all of that. And I feel like I was, looking back, I'm so grateful for that, both opportunities, because they both taught me a lot, what to do and what not to do to kind of survive in that particular industry.
Now you've worked on a lot of different shows, and I know you created the Loud House, and we'll get to that here in a few minutes. But
Okay.
of the ones that you didn't create, what was kind of the favorite show that you worked on, and why was it such a good experience?
Well, gosh. It's hard to say. I will answer the question. I'm not going to skirt it. It's hard to say because you do a job and you take what you learned, both positive and negative, from that job, and you take it to the next job, and you keep moving forward with that. So each job becomes more fun and exciting the more you get involved in the actual, like, the nuts and bolts of the show, not just your one piece of like that cog in the machine, but when you get to be a part of all of the pieces, that's where it really is the most fun. So I can say, like, yeah, I'm still waiting for the best show that I've worked on. But I'll go back to, I think Dexter's Lab. And the reason is that it was the beginning of Cartoon Network. And it wasn't like it was the Wild West or anything, but they really gave Genndy Tartakovsky like the freedom to, and the trust, most importantly, like, this is the show that I want to make. Here's why it's going to work, and just let me prove it. And he had some of the most amazing, fresher talent coming out of school and into this show that I really had the pleasure to work with. Everybody had their own style and their own unique point of view that they were allowed to bring into the show. Yes, the entire show filtered through Genndy, but he was open to input from a lot of people. And I think he understood early on, like, well, if I'm lacking in this particular part of the process, and this guy or gal over here is excelling at it, I'm going to bring them in, and ultimately we're going to make this great show. So I did. I learned a lot of things, and it was at that point I was storyboarding. And I was interested in timing for animation, like the sheets that you're writing down all the movements on, and directing. And he was really gracious with his time on that. Like, if he was doing sheets, well, can you just tell me what you're doing here? And of course he was like, well, you've never animated, so it's really difficult for someone who's never animated to understand the value of a frame, which I fully understand what he meant by that. By cutting one or adding one, how it can really change the dynamic of a scene, or at least the timing of the scene. And so he showed me, and eventually, like, I weaseled my way into the story meetings and was involved in creating the outlines for the show. And then it just kind of evolved to a point where, we were weaning off of Dexter's Lab and kind of ramping up Powerpuff Girls, because it was all pretty much the same crew.
Oh, okay.
And at a certain point, I had I'd already kind of solidified myself in that group. So I moved on to Powerpuff Girls and was really involved with the stories and really involved with storyboarding and etc. And so when Dexter's Lab was going to restart, Gendy had already started developing and production on Samurai Jack. So I don't know why he asked me, but he asked me if I would run the show. Like, yeah, I would love to run the show. I think because I knew the show well enough that he could trust me to do it, and I'm grateful for that. So, skipping Powerpuff Girls and going to Dexter's Lab, and the first time I did sheets for one of the little shorts, he was still involved with the show. He was going over designs and approving designs and timing and stories and all of that stuff. And he said, he came to me. He's like, I know once I told you that you had to be an animator to do timing sheets. He said, but I'm looking at these and you did a great job. He's like, these sheets are actually better than some animators that I know doing sheets.
Oh, wow.
So that was a huge compliment, and it really gave me the kind of the confidence to move forward and do that show. So I know we're skipping over Powerpuff Girls, but that whole Dexter's Lab experience is where I think I learned the most. And I compare it to like when I was in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, where I had one teacher. We had a mixed class where it was 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and I had her for all 3 years. And I feel like everything that she taught me, even on the most basic level, was what I used for the rest of my life as far as how I conducted myself, how I treated others, etc. And that's the same thing I did with Dexter's Lab moving forward. Was like the graciousness of all those people on the show, sharing their knowledge, sharing their talent, teaching and listening and helping, all those things. I was like, the phrase is "pay it forward." That was my goal moving forward. Was like, I'm going to give people the kinds of chances that I was given, and also give people the time that I was given. So I hope that answers your question in the longest way possible.
Absolutely. No, great job. So I guess let's skip ahead a little bit.
Let us.
And you were given the opportunity to create a show, and you created The Loud House. Yeah. And that's actually a show that my youngest daughter really loved. How did that all come about? And I know a little bit of your story, because that kind of comes along the side with your actual family, somewhat, correct? So tell us how all that came about.
Okay. Well, clearly you can see by my credits, I've worked on a lot of shows, and through that time, I have been pitching show ideas. Admittedly, I don't know if it's jealousy or envy or just wanting what somebody else has, but working with people like Gendy Tartakovsky or Craig McCracken or Paul Rudish, like they were like on their first show, their second show, and heading, into their third show, and I'm like, I really want this for myself too. So the more no's I got, the more frustrated I became in not having a show. Granted, I was working on some of the best shows on air at the time. So looking back, I'm super grateful for that. And I remember I was working at Disney. I was on an overall deal, which was I just kind of worked on everything that they had going on.
Yeah.
I directed the pilot for Kick Buttowski, and that became a series. So I worked on that series as a showrunner, etc. But there was a point, and I remember thinking this, like, maybe I don't have a show in me. I had enough 4 or 5 at least by this time for pitches. I had enough where I felt like, well, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not a showrunner. Maybe I don't have ideas that are series worthy. I do have a great career. I get called to do jobs rather than me pounding the pavement. I was getting phone calls. Hey, are you available? And I would hope that it's because my track record spoke ahead of me. Like it was like, oh, well, you can run a show, you can come in and take over a show. If there's problems, you can help clean up a show. So I just kind of gave not that I gave up, I came to terms with, is a better way of putting it. I accepted that maybe this was going to be my career, and I was okay with that. I was working with some great people. Like who can turn their nose up at that? And I liken it to, there's a when you're trying to find your future wife, and you're just seeking and you're not finding, and you're frustrated. And at a certain point, you're like, you know what? I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. I give up on women. And it's almost like that very day you say you give up on it and you accept it. You get like you meet someone, you run into somebody at a supermarket, and they become your wife or whatever. It was like that. I feel like as soon as I gave up that desire and was accepting of where my place was, it's when the doors kind of opened for me, and it's like the desperation was gone. It's like people could smell desperation. You go into a pitch and you're like, all you want is to sell the darn thing, and you stumble and you're sweating. And I feel like that was gone. And it's not that I gave up pitching. It's just like I didn't care if it was no at that point. And so it was a weight off my shoulders. Anyway, so I started work at Nickelodeon on another overall deal. And part of my deal was we'll pitch us 3 ideas and we'll maybe choose one for our shorts program. Great. So I pitched 3 of them. 2 of them were no, of course, and that was okay. I didn't care. And the Loud House was the 3rd one. Now, the Loud House originally was about a boy rabbit with 25 sisters. And the joke was, rabbits have 25 sisters. And I had been working on a show with human characters, and I was just so tired of the type of notes you get when it's human characters. Well, this character can't do this. You can't have him crash through that wall because it's standards and practices. But if it was an animal character, that's totally okay. So I'm like, I told the executive, I don't want to do a human show. I just want to do a funny animal show. And they liked the idea of the Loud House as I pitched it with rabbits. Now, you mentioned it was about like tying in with my family, but it had not tied in yet, which is the fun. And so we were like maybe 2 or 3 steps into the process of making a short. Like I think I was pitching short ideas. I had already gotten approval for the show pitch, but what is your short going to be? And so it was a good meeting. It was with a couple executives. And as I was leaving, the main executive just kind of leans over. She goes, just consider making them human. And I know she knows that it's not what I wanted to do. From her office to my office downstairs, I think I was fuming. You could probably see smoke coming out of my ears. But by the time I sat at my desk, I realized she was right. I opened up the model sheet that I had done for the main rabbit character and just erased rabbit details, the nose, the ears, the tail, and put human characteristics on it. And I feel like what happened in that was I suddenly connected it with my life. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm from a big family, and I have 9 brothers and sisters. I have 5 sisters. And so I reduced the number clearly. Just, I think mathematically you can't have 25 kids that are within an age range of 1 to 18, but I made it 10, and I made Lincoln the middle character because it was about, you got this boy character that he's about the balance of the show. Like these things started coming to me. Like it was like an avalanche of just connections. Like, wait a minute, my sisters are all L names and they're all 4 letters. They're all middle named Marie. So I took my sister's names and made it L. And Lincoln, like I grew up on the street Lincoln, and that's where his name came from. And like all these things from my life started pouring into the show idea, the pitch. And I feel like that it was that injection of I don't want to say reality, but you feel like this was authentic. And I think that the people who I was pitching to felt it as well, because it just, my demeanor changed on it. And as we were making the short, some of us were asked to do like a pilot episode, an 11-minute episode. And all of those things that were in my head about my family started to inject themselves into it. And I think you feel that authenticity when you watch the show. And as I said before about like opening yourself up to input from other people, I'd sat down with a writer at Nickelodeon, and he was going to help kind of punch up the little short. And he's listening. He sits down. He's like, okay, well, my first question is like, I assume their last name is Loud, since the name of the show was The Loud House. And like it was like somebody smacked me in the face. I'm like, well, it is now. I had never. It is The Loud House. Their last name is Loud. It's an alliteration with the names I've given. Like it just fell. Everything that happened on that show just fell into place, and it was. I kid you not. It was like one of the smoothest progresses from I pitched the idea like in March of 2000, I want to say 13, maybe 14. And a year later, it was picked up to series. Like that is a very short period of time for an idea to then get picked up to series. And I think it's because I was open to those things. Not only that executive who said, make it humans, but also as people, as you're bringing on writers, etc., they see, oh, you're pulling from your life. Well, when I was a kid, I had this thing happen to me. Oh, that's a great like moment. Let's build a story around that. And there's this pride that they get of like, oh, I kind of contributed to the building of this show. And it was either writers or designers or storyboard artists. They were all free to inject themselves into it or their childhood into it. And it maintained that authenticity through the entire series. And I think kids are smart and they know when you're feeding them kind of BS.
Yeah.
But I think when it's authentic and we're not trying to talk down to them, we had these kids in the show talking how we all talk to each other as siblings. And it just, I feel like that authenticity, whether they were aware or not, kind of spoke to them. And I remember we were just getting ready to premiere, and the art director, we were standing around like approving some art or something, and she goes, "What if it's a failure?" And like, my only response was like, "What if it's a success?" Like that's the same kind of fear. Like if you fear of failure or fear of success, it's like those are both difficult to deal with. And it was a success, and I really couldn't tell you why, but it was. I think The Loud House was, to me, it was about. It was kind of like a culmination of all those pitches. You're hearing these executives throwing these buzzwords out. You have like, we need fresh design. We need to push this or push that. We need to create a world and all these things that are great for shows. But for this show specifically, it was like, no. I want it to feel like where I got my, desire to draw was the Sunday funnies. That feeling of opening up the comics on Sunday morning and seeing the familiar family there that you're going to get either wholesome or whatever entertainment for that moment. And you're familiar with it. So I wanted the show to be familiar. So even the designs, the backgrounds, it was like, I wanted you to say, well, I've seen this before. It's like, right. You want to feel like the show's your old friend, even though you haven't even seen it yet. Which is amazing because as soon as the show kind of hit, you get executives coming to you. It's like, oh, I love the look of the show. It's so fresh. Like, no, that's not what I wanted at all. I didn't want fresh. Like, yeah, I'm glad you think it's fresh. Awesome. So the more it was about, and the show isn't really about my family. It's about what it's like to grow up in a big family. And I think there's a universality of having siblings or a cousin that you have to deal with. And that made it into the show, not just my experiences, but everyone's experiences. And I think that's what gives the show its legs, its longevity that it's had. I think it's going into season 8 production now. Awesome. And it has a spinoff, a live action spinoff too.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting. You don't see that a whole lot in animated shows getting a live action spinoff. Yeah,
there are some people who still hate the idea, and I say out of any show, it was the one that seemed appropriate to try that. Not, like I think Fairly Odd Parents did it, and a couple others. Even like, well, I guess the CW was going to do a Powerpuff Girls live action show, and just recently, I think they just pulled the plug on it. but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, wow, I can't believe that the thing that we built, and I always say we, I never really say I, that we built has enough love and authenticity and legs to it that it can not only continue as a cartoon, but people are interested in seeing it as live action. And I think it's fantastic. And if I was a crying person, I would cry over how joyful it makes me.
Awesome. Well, so this being the Christian Nerds Unite podcast, I like to look at people's faith journey, and yours is a little interesting because during all this time you spent in the industry with Nickelodeon and Disney, you weren't a believer at that point,
Nope.
correct?
That's
So
100%
what changed in your life that really brought that to a moment of, God is real and this is something I need?
okay. Well, I should preface by saying my whole life, I was, with a big family. I think my mom was Catholic technically, and so was my dad. And I think the first few kids got, the confirmation and
Confirmation and
baptized and
christening and all that.
all of that stuff. Like, and then I think as your family grows, like we're not dragging 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids to church, so it just kind of stopped. But there was always that specter of church or God around the house. The odd comment here and there, of like, don't take the Lord's name in vain or whatever. But it was never impressed upon me to go to church or to believe. But one thing is that I've always had a fear of death. And let's see, one real time I thought about religion, specifically Christianity, is like, okay, what happens when you die? Is it nothing? How could it be nothing? Like my monkey brain could not wrap its brain around nothing. At the same time, I couldn't wrap my brain around eternity. Like, what does that mean? To live forever? Like, it's got to stop at some point. Like, I would be up all night thinking about this kind of stuff. It would just keep me awake, going through like, okay, well, eternity, but that's got to stop at some point, doesn't it? But then you're back to the point of like nothingness again, and that would freak me out. Like, I would sweat thinking about this stuff, and I didn't know how to get rid of that fear of death. Anyway, so yes, I had a great career and a popular show. We were headlong into the third season. People were saying things like, "You saved Nickelodeon," or I was at a Disney executive meeting and they're like, "Where's our Loud House?" Like all those things are like, are they talking about the Loud House? Like I couldn't believe it, but it was like on top of the world, right? I had all of it. I had the show and the career and the family and the house and the dogs and the car, etc. But in October 2017, I think the bottom fell out on that. And as probably your viewers know, I was called out in the Me Too movement. And before I knew it, within a week, all of it was gone. It was taken from me. I was severed ties with Nickelodeon. They took the show and continued to produce it, which I'm grateful for, that they were able to continue that. My ex-wife now, like the way she found out about all this is online. The worst thing ever. Not only are you keeping secrets from your ex, but you are outed online. And, it got really, really bad as far as the rumor mill and the gossip and the talking and the truths and the lies. And like, it was horrible. And I think, the notion of what a horrible husband I was, what a terrible father I was, and ultimately a terrible colleague. And then to top it all off, the fans of the show, which weren't just localized, it was worldwide, having disappointed them in such a way that I heard from a lot of them, I can't even watch the show anymore. All this stuff. It was a rough couple of months. So I found myself now living by myself in a single apartment in Burbank. I found myself one night in January, right after, like 2018 now. And, I was kind of talking out loud, but in my brain, I was thinking like, how in the world did I screw this up so bad. You had it all. These things you should have been happy with. And I had been struggling with, but not struggling with, drinking and workaholic, and also the notion of needing attention from others. And that's the thing that really got me in big trouble was the kind of not having boundaries as not only as a man, but as a showrunner, etc., of just having inappropriate conversations with people, especially the fact that I'm married. All of the things that you can read online, but I'm sitting there thinking, like, what was my problem? Like, I had a full-time, I was running a hit show, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, yet I still felt like I was missing out on something. So I would be taking on freelance or doing some other work on top of that. Like, I just couldn't help myself. And the drinking had gone from like, well, I'll have a beer tonight to unwind from the day. It turned into 2 beers to unwind from the day, which turned into like 2 beers and a shot with each one, etc. Just got out of control. And I wasn't like a horrible drunk. Most of it was by myself. It was either at lunch, at work, or at night after everybody had gone to bed. I did most of my drinking. And unfortunately, that's when I did most of my texting. And that, all of those things really kind of interconnect to a degree. Is like, you've got this hit show and suddenly everybody wants to be your friend. Everybody's reaching out to you. And I didn't keep it at that. I didn't keep it at the just reaching out because, hey, I want a job, or how can you help me find work, or whatever. I was like, well, now that we're talking, insert your own point of view there. So it got out of control, and all of it catches up with you. Eventually, it all does, no matter what it is. Drinking, workaholic, inappropriate conversations with people. It catches up with you, even if you're hiding it. Everything will be brought to light. And it was brought to light. And so I was sitting there in my apartment thinking, like, what is it that I was missing in my life? These temporary fixes that I was getting, only but to have the next day feel like crap. And like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. And then to start it all again the next night. And I'll say I did quit drinking in August, and I'm coming up on my 6th year of sobriety at the end of July. I did quit drinking because I was just feeling really gross. I thought, I want to try quit drinking for a week. And I did it, and I felt better. I'm like, I'm going to try it 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks has turned into almost 6 years. And I'm thankful for that, because when the bottom did drop out of my life, and all of this stuff, this like pounding, like noise from all over the world and the internet, just like beating me up, I do know that if I had still been drinking, I would have just been dead at the bottom of a bottle. Guaranteed. I don't know how I was able to get through it. I know now, but I was so thankful that I had quit. Anyway, so I found myself in my room, back to that, and I just asked out loud. Literally, I said it out loud, and I stumbled through it a little bit too. I was like, I don't know why I remember this. Like, is God missing from my life? Is that what it is? And as soon as I asked that question, I thought, I need to find this answer. So I went online and just started seeking. And I didn't realize that that's part of the Bible where it says, seek and you will find, knock and he will answer. And I thought, I need to knock. And we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. I feel like when I was digging into the Bible and what it was and who's this Jesus guy, what's the New Testament versus the Old Testament, I started to realize, like, I had no idea what was in this book. What I thought the book was about was not this at all. And it was so fascinating, like the whole idea of like things that Jesus was saying in the New Testament was actually things that he was referring to in the Old Testament. It's like these hyperlinks. And it was blowing my mind. People know I was into aliens and Bigfoot. Like, he was right up there with like, this fascinates me. So even if I remained secular, I think I would be digging into that because it's just so fascinating. But I realized it wasn't reading the gospel about so much of like him being crucified, dying and resurrecting, dying for my sin, me specifically. that fascinated me the most and drove me towards it. It was right afterwards, like all these apostles who had pretty much the same fate coming their way.
Mhm.
They scattered, rightly so. But the fact that they turned and came back and faced it, like what happened that they would do this? And so when they say they saw him, resurrected Jesus in front of them, like, yeah, that would make me do that too. Like, and so that was the thing that was like, you know what? I believe. But of course, like any new believer, it's like, why would God want me? I'm screwed. I'm messed up big time. I'm at the bottom. I am at rock bottom. Why would he want me? Why would he forgive me, etc.? So there were like one or two people that I knew in the industry were Christians.
Hmm.
For whatever reason, I knew this. It's not like any Christians really spoke about it openly in this industry that's really a secular industry. And those Christians keep it to themselves. Because, I admittedly was someone who would poke fun at Christians. Oh, you're going to church this weekend? Like, make fun of. And I look back, I was like, boy, do I feel guilty for doing that. Have I ever made them feel bad about being a Christian? Boy, I'm sorry. And I really do pray for their forgiveness on that. Nonetheless, I reached out and I learned about grace and what that was. I'm like, well, why should I be given grace? It's like, it's there as a gift. It's up to you to receive it. It's not like God has offered this to everybody and he sent his son to die for you in this respect of like, you sinner, me, the person who's like, why do I deserve it? It's like, there are people who don't deserve it at all, but God is still willing and loves them enough to give them this grace, if only they'll accept it. So it was like, out of all the stuff I'm reading, the free gift of grace was like, I don't get it. I'm like, all I'm looking for is forgiveness from these people in my life who I've wronged and these fans of my show who I've disappointed, etc. I want forgiveness from them. But I realized during this journey that I wasn't going to get it from them. And I realized it's not who I really wanted it from. I wanted forgiveness from God. And somebody was like, he is giving it to you. You just need to accept it. I'm like, okay, well, then maybe I need to start going to church. Same. He's like, well, I go to this little church in North Hollywood. You should come one Sunday. Okay, I'll go. And it was a weird time. I admittedly was sweating a little bit in the palms. I didn't know what to expect. And it was it wasn't like going into a Catholic church where the churches are beautiful, but it wasn't like that. It was just like a space they were renting with chairs they put out every week, and there was a stage. Anyway, he starts his message for the day, and I kid you not, the message he gave was like the audience disappeared and there was a spotlight on me. It wasn't him up there talking to me, it was God talking to me, as if somebody had gone in ahead and said, hey, this guy's going to be here today. You need to tailor your message around what he's going through. And I swear it was like somebody knows knows me and what I'm going through, what I'm feeling, what I'm afraid of, and what I want, and what I am ultimately opening myself up to. And I went, and that was the first time I went to church. That was in February of I think it was like the Valentine's weekend, because they were giving out these paper hearts. I still have it somewhere. And that was February of 2018, not a few months after the bottom fell out in my life. And May of 2018, I had already committed myself to Jesus. I was getting baptized on May 6th and
Amen.
about to start my life. I lost everything, but in it, I gained everything that I didn't even know that's what I needed in my life, but that's what I needed. And so I haven't looked back. I think the only time I ever missed a Sunday of church is because I was out of town. So I'm thankful for that. And that forgiveness is the strength that I needed to kind of continue and move forward. I certainly felt like in this time, the 6 years that it's been, that there would have been opportunities afforded me to I'd given up on moving back to Los Angeles and working in that industry amongst my peers. I'd given up on that, and not in a negative way. I just felt hopeless, and all I wanted was an opportunity to earn back the trust that I know I betrayed in a lot of people. And I put it in order. Clearly it was my family, it was my boys and my ex-wife. I needed to rebuild trust with them, and everything else, if it comes, it comes. It's God's will, however it's going to play itself out. It's okay with me. But those were the most important things. Admittedly, my relationship with my boys are better than it ever has been. And the relationship with my ex-wife is really, really good. We co-parent. It's great. We both live in different states, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But I feel like in everything that happened, I really wish that all those people who had all that negative stuff to say about me online would have just taken a moment to realize that there are innocent people that are going to see this as well, that are getting really hurt by this. I'd hoped that somebody would have just reached out to her and just said, I'm sorry that you're having to deal with this too. And that just put me in a frame of mind of like what I needed to do to I can't say fix it. That's the wrong word. Just to do my best to earn back that trust that I lost with them.
That's an amazing story of redemption. I'm so glad to hear, what you went through. That's
and as you know, it's a never ending thing.
Yeah. Well, and now you're kind of restarting your career, and you have some projects that you're working toward. And I'm a little unclear as to where they are in the process, how much you have done and how much you're trying to do. And I know that you've started working alongside of Lore, who I had on the podcast a few weeks ago. But what is the future look like for you, Chris?
Well, the future is where our hope lies as Christians, right? That future. But grounded here back on earth, one thing that I was doing is actually, I didn't know where I was headed. As a Christian, you try to put it all at the Lord's feet and just say, help me to know which direction you have me in. Like whatever your will, I will do it. I just guide me. And I honestly, admittedly pray like, God, you've given me these gifts that I've kind of spoiled a little bit here. I really pray that you will allow me to use these gifts to honor you and glorify the kingdom. I wanted this new love of God, love of Christ kind of version of me mixed with the experience of working in animation or drawing and all that. I wanted to bring them together. And Lord, if this is what you have for me, please just put me on the right path towards that. And this has been, it's been almost 6 years of praying that. And I think the one thing that I'm learning is trust in God's will, and trust that God makes good even out of the bad. And I admit there are some days when I'm not so trusting. There are some days when I'm like, well, I know I gave roll over to you, but let me just pull some of these things back. I can make that phone call. You don't need to make it happen, magically for me, or supernaturally, I should say, not magic. But it is something that I want to do, and I feel like, yes, this is something that I can do. So over the last few years, I wrote a book, a children's, like a middle grade book, novel, I should say, which was
That's
just
a Christmas book, correct?
Christmas book called Cole, yeah. And funnily enough, it was at my darkest, kind of lowest point. And what crept into that story, which wasn't there before, and I don't think it would have been there had this stuff not happened, it was a story of redemption. A kid realizing he's to blame for all of this stuff. And to redeem himself, he needs to give up all of these things that he felt were the most important things to him in order to show others that he is a changed person and that he has earned trust and love. That made it into the story. I don't know how, it just is. So, I had hoped it was difficult. I wasn't going to get a publisher. Nobody wanted to talk to me, let alone put my name on something or my name within their company. So I self-published it on Amazon, which, you get like 2 books a month or something sold.
Yeah.
And I wrote another book. I felt like maybe I wasn't going to be in the industry anymore, but I had a lot to offer as far as experience and knowledge. So I wrote a book called Writing Cartoons in 4 Acts, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Midpoint. If you know me, you understand that. I probably have time for that. And so those are on Amazon. And I thought maybe somebody would see the book, the Cole, and go like, this would make a great feature, and want to work with me. That hasn't happened yet. But nonetheless, I was doing some work for TBN. I pitched them some kind of faith-based ideas, and it was wonky to say the least, as far as like what they were looking for, what I was giving to them, how far did they want to make it a faith-based show versus a little bit more wider audience. Nonetheless, I had pitched a few ideas, and they picked one that we were going to develop a pilot. For whatever reason, I'm no longer on that project, but it left me with 2 others that I was pitching them. And one of them was kind of like I couldn't put it in words when I was pitching it then, but I just said it's like Rocky and Bullwinkle mixed with the Bible, which they liked the idea, but nothing ever came of it. So when I was moved from that other project that's still kind of going, I wanted this one because that was the one that was more my style. I wasn't trying to ham fist in some morals into a story. But, I always say, like, I was so lucky to be in this place, or I was so lucky to get that job. And I look back now, I'm like, wow, God was really, he just delivered. He just kept giving me things along the way. And I look back, 2020, hindsight is 2020. So I see that now as not luck, but God in my life. Even though I wasn't seeking him, he was there for me. Nonetheless, I didn't know what I wanted to do with that idea. And I had stopped watching cartoons because it made me feel sick to my stomach that look what I'm missing out on. I didn't like watching them because I thought about all the people involved in making them, and I felt sad and lonely, etc. But one day I was like sitting there, and I was like, I pushed play on a Sherman and Peabody cartoon on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
And I think I'd seen it growing up, but I was really a Rocky and Bullwinkle fan. I was an even bigger fan of Super Chicken and George of the Jungle, but never really Sherman and Peabody. But for whatever reason, I watched it. And what I realized is it wasn't just silly, we're going back in time and making fun of all of this history. It actually had some elements of education in it. And I watched this one about Geronimo. And apparently he had to sign some treaty, which he wasn't signing in the cartoon. And their job was to get him to sign this darn thing. And after I was done watching, it was a good episode. There's some good jokes in it. I was like, oh, these things can be educational. What if I took that and applied it to this? And it's like, boop, the whole idea came to me. I'm going to have these characters go back in time through biblical history and correct biblical history that was going wrong. And then it'll give me an opportunity to lay down some scripture, to get kids interested in biblical history, and to also lay down some actual truth. Like, you go back in time, you learn that Joseph had this amazing coat that his dad gave him that his brothers were jealous of. Like, that's a pretty good chunk of history right there. Pretty good, interesting thing for kids to kind of latch onto. And the goal was, like, if they're interested in that, they might go and go, well, I want to know what happens now when they go and read the Bible. Nonetheless, like, it's just one of those things where you can only thank God, because I'm not a fast writer. I don't have a ton of ideas. And when I do, I spend a lot of time on them, but it's just like, it just fell out of me. Like, the whole thing, the sheep, it's called Busted Bible Stories, I should say. And it's about a sheep named Sheep and this little boy named Danny. And they are sent back in time by Angelo, this kind of New York cabbie angel who uses like these lightning bolts that he flings at them with his harp to send them back in time. And they either know what's going on or they have to figure out what's going on, but they're quick 5.5-minute episodes. So I wrote this one about Joseph, which is why I said it. I wrote it out and I thought the script was good. I'm like, well, I may as well storyboard it. And so I storyboarded it. It's like, well, I may as well do an animatic of it. And of course, the hope is maybe this animatic will get people interested in funding me to make this or buy it. And my work will come out ahead of me rather than me first. And then like, well, you've had some issues and not leapfrogging it so much of like, look, I know there's that elephant's in the room, but if my work can go in before me and I can get you interested, we can discuss the other thing and see how we all feel about it rather than just shutting the door in my face. That was kind of my feeling at the time. Anyway, so I did the scratch voice for it, and I might not even watch this stream because I hate the sound of my voice. And so I played it back and I edited it and like, boy, I think this is funny, but my voice just ruins it. And so a fellow Christian and a fellow animation veteran, James Arnold Taylor, who does voices for animation, I worked with him a number of times in the past. I knew he was Christian. I knew that he moved out of LA into Tennessee. So it can't hurt to reach out to this guy. So I reached out to him, and he's so gracious. Of course I'll do this voice for you. And I got the name of another guy, Dan Garza, who is an amazing puppeteer, awesome voice guy. And so between them, they re-recorded my crummy scratch, and I edited it together and had this great little short on my hand. And it was at this time when the anger starts to kind of bubble itself towards the surface again. And I was like, what am I doing? I was like, nobody's going to want this. Nobody's going to want to talk to me. I don't even know who to call anymore. I was in a position previously in my life where I could pick up the phone and just make things happen. Oh, you want to make this thing? I know exactly who to call. I couldn't call anybody. So I get angry and depressed and not suicidal. But like, I just don't want to be here anymore. So I'd called some friends or emailed some friends from where I used to live in San Jose from church. And it's like, I just need some prayers. I just am feeling really crummy. And it would really help me out if you could just put me in your prayers this week. And of course, some responses, you're in my prayers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I kid you not, this is like how great God is. This was weeks after James had done this for me. And he emailed me. I get an email from him. It's like, hey, I just met these guys I think they were in Dallas. They were doing this convention or this pitch fair. They have this streaming service they're starting called Lure TV, which is kind of a faith-based streaming service and kind of an answer to what's going on in Hollywood. Their slogan is like, cancel Hollywood. I'm like, well, this sounds good to me. I don't mind, but I pitched your idea to them and I said, I think they should reach out to you. And he's like, I've already prefaced everything that's going on in your life, where you are, where you've been, etc. And I said, yes, but please have them reach out. Jason Farley, who's one of the co-founders of Lure, the creative head of bringing in projects, emailed me. We had a Zoom call, and within 2 weeks of James emailing me that initial time, God bless him, I had a contract in my inbox on my email to sign to have Busted Bible Stories part of Lure TV, which, I mean, thank God, right? And that, it's been a year and a half now, and that's why I said God is teaching me patience. Because in my brain, I'm like, wow. Well, we've got a whole streaming service we need to build from scratch, and the monetary system of the loot within it, of how subscribers get to put their subscription money towards a specific project to help it get off the ground faster or slower, depending. Which, boy, it really does teach you patience. So I think in your recent podcast with Jason and with Marcus, it hadn't launched yet, but it has launched now.
Okay, great.
It's been a few weeks, but it is doing really remarkably well. Granted, we all know these early adopters will have to suffer the idea that I'm putting this subscription up every month, but there's no content yet. But they get a chance to see what people are pitching and go, I really love and support this idea. This is what I'm putting my subscription money towards. So there's a sense of I had something to do with it. I feel like there's going to be more and more people that will latch on to that idea. But it's upfront. It's just got to be the people who see that you've planted a tree, and I can see that kind of tree in the future is going to have a lot of shade. I might not get the shade right now, but in the future I will. So who knows how long that's going to be. My project, Busted Bible Stories, is in the second round of funding. They launched with, I think, maybe 6 projects. And I think they had to mix it up. Like we've got some animation. They've got the barely biblical one, which is funding really, really well. Thank God. And they've got some documentary and some horror. It's like, so it's a mixed bag of what is possible, and a mixed bag of varying budgets. We could easily say like, well, let's do it for as cheap as we can. And then you run the risk of not making good product. So there's a balance you have to find of like, what's a good amount that these people will feel like, yeah, that's a good amount of money. I'll pay for that. And the time, of course, to make it. So I've got to make what I think is what I hope to be a really good-looking cartoon using all of my experience, and I'm not calling in favors anymore, but also understanding of like where to put that money to have it best come out in the final product, so people can feel like they've backed something of value and not like. And no offense to these people, because God bless them for doing it. The animations that are done in someone's basement and put up on YouTube almost every day. It's stick figures moving around. Like I can't give you stick figures. We need to give as the best we can to glorify the kingdom, and hopefully those early shows will be the snowball effect to get more subscribers, which means more money to put towards better shows. And in the end, I mean, like, Cole, the book, is something that I've shared with Jason and Marcus. I would love it one day that you guys have enough subscribers that we could put Cole up there as a feature film to fund. Because we're talking millions at that point, not just $100,000 to make an animated show, but millions. And I pray that they get there. Even if it's not me, it's for everyone else, because there are a lot of ideas out there, a lot of good Christian men and women who have great stories to tell that otherwise would not be given an opportunity to do so, or have to hide that idea from people like me who made fun of you while you were in the I do pray that those people get that opportunity, and that it opens up this alternative. My pitch is making shows, animated or live action, that fit within a certain age group. They've got preschool shows for kids, and they've got adult shows, and there's a void in the middle. Like I want to hit that. I'm not looking to evangelize. I'm not looking to bring people into the fold. I'm talking to the people who are in the fold, who feel like they're forgotten in that period of time, entertainment-wise. Of like, I'm giving you something, so you don't have to go to school and be jealous that people are talking about Rick and Morty, and so you go seek that out and kind of undermine your faith. I'm giving you something that you can hopefully feel like you've got an alternative to go to. And that's what everybody's trying to build, is an alternative to the stuff that's being made that is causing people to maybe stray and shouldn't be caused to stray, only because they feel like they've been left out in some respect. So, with Busted Bible hopefully coming to Lure soon for funding, I've started a production company to help facilitate that whole thing called Good Fruit Christian Content. And the idea is to build a brand, and you talked about kind of rebuilding myself, is to build a brand where people know when they see this brand on a show or whatever, that they know they're going to get clean but funny and entertaining content that they wouldn't get otherwise, and feel safe to know that either their kids are watching it or whatever, and is not going to steer anybody in the wrong direction. So, I got Busted Bible Stories is hopefully going into development or a production, and then in development there's a live action like comedy musical show in the vein of the Monkees that
Okay.
James Arnold Taylor has agreed to play the pastor in the show, which is amazing. So I
Nice.
read the script based on his talents as a voice actor, and I've got a young lady in Tennessee, Jessie Lynn Dudinsky, who is writing the first song, because I feel like the music is the thing that's going to sell it.
Yeah.
That's the next thing in the pipeline. There's nobody looking at it yet, but hopefully that music and that pitch and the actors who are involved will help at least get a pilot made. That would be great. And if we could put it up on Lure as a pilot to show people, like, do you want to fund this type of show too? Eventually, that would be great. So that's where I am, and thank God for all of it. Is God going to answer my prayer of mixing the gifts He's given me with glorifying the kingdom? Boy, I hope so. I'm working towards that, and He seems to be bringing the right people into my life. And I try to thank Him daily for that one, and thank Him daily for giving me the strength to wake up every day.
Nice. Well, Chris, I'm excited about what you've got going. I'm excited the things you've shared that you're working on right now. Some of those sound really great to me. I'm looking forward to seeing more and more there. I definitely want to honor your time. Thank you so much for being on the show and offering so much openness today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Anytime.
It was great getting to know Chris and hearing his story. I've put a couple links down in the show notes for some of the work that he's done. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, just click all those links down there. That way you can keep up with us as we create new content. You can find all of our social links and links to the YouTube channel and our online store at ChristianNerdUnite.com. If you enjoy the show and want to help even more, consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. We've changed all of our Patreon levels, and every level has great benefits and makes a huge difference in the ministry we're able to do. Supporters will also get to hear exclusive stories of believers we're serving around the world through our ministry partners. To check it out or to partner with us, go to patreon.com/ChristianNerdUnite or ChristianNerdUnite.com and click support in the menu. And don't forget to check out ChristianNerdHQ.com for more great podcasts just like this one. Before you go, I do want to leave you with this blessing from Ephesians 3. I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. We'll see you next week. Blessings.
Hey